Welcome to Quick News Questions, brought to you by the Wexford Missaukee ISD. I am joined here by Matt Seward from the Cadillac News. So, Matt, what is your favorite part about working in the news field?
It's probably the people we meet, and the stories we get to tell. They that really appreciate. They allow us to tell their stories, and it's amazing the number of people you meet and the different backgrounds and lifestyles and expertise. It's really amazing. I think probably my favorite type stories have been when I've been able to interview World War II veterans, especially since there aren't many of them around anymore. But they just have some amazing stories, and what they went through is, obviously hats off to them and thank you. Those have been really fun. But there's just so many people that have interesting stories. It's amazing.
Mm-hmm. And what's your least favorite thing about working with the news?
The least favorite. I mean, one of the drawbacks are, like I have to work Thanksgiving, working holidays sometimes, you're away from your family, and that's kind of tough. But probably the worst thing about actually the news business right now is dealing with fake news and how it gets spread on social media and stuff like that. It's really tough for, us local journalists, because we're not telling national stories and that type of thing. So our stories are local and we work really hard to make sure they're factually correct. We get both sides of the story or all sides of the story and, that they're not biased. And the fake news just really, it really damages the credibility of media everywhere and even here locally. And you wouldn't think it does, but unfortunately it does. And that's probably the thing I like least about the news business.
Yeah. Can you walk us through the production process of printing a paper?
Yeah, there's quite a few parts. We have news editors and sports editors that will lay out the paper on a computer. When they're done, they'll send the page off to be what we call plated. It gets put on a printing press. And that printing press, the plate goes through like a huge printer. And then it comes out. The press room guys will come and bend the plate, and they put the plate on the press. They'll have, they have to feed the paper through the press, make sure the ink is in the press, that type of thing. And then they start the press up, and they have to line, like if we have color, they have to line up the color and so on. And it's quite, that part's really hard. It's quite the process. So that's, in a nutshell, how we do it. Kind of the Reader's Digest condensed version, how we do it.
Okay, that's cool. How many papers do you print in a week?
That's a good question. I think it's around 50,000-60,000 total in a week. Might be more. I don't have the exact number, but I think it's right around there.
Wow, that's a lot.
Yeah. I wish it was more.
True. How much does it cost to produce a given day's paper?
Now that's tough. I don't have the actual. Hey man, I don't have a dollar figure. I can tell you, kind of like what I explained with the process. We have, besides the editors that are working on the pages and printing out the plates. There's a cost to the plates. There's a cost to the pressmen and the people that work out in the press. There's cost of the paper, cost of the ink. All of that goes into it. But I think what a lot of people miss is the cost of reporters and the news gathering process. And that's not cheap. The reporters like to get paid, and I'll be the first one to say that, I wish we could pay them a lot more than we do, because I think they're very valuable. They have a very important role in the community as well as the newspaper. And that often gets overlooked, I think, and how much work that goes into it. You think just sitting at a meeting, it's not just sitting at a meeting taking notes, but it is that. It's also doing some fact checking, some background information, doing some follow-up interviews, and then there's the writing process, which takes time too. So it's not just, I turn around a story in 5 minutes. There are times when we have breaking news and it's developing, and we are doing that. But that's another cost that's part of the cost of printing the paper. There's also advertising and other office workers, customer service that are really valuable to the newspaper. All of that adds up. There's a lot that goes into putting the newspaper together and making up the cost.
Okay. Have you ever been unable to print a paper?
Yeah, several times, unfortunately. Everything from power outages to equipment failure. Sometimes the press will break down. Sometimes the plating equipment will break down. And there's been times when we haven't been able to print the paper. And when that happens, what we do, depending on the situation, what we do is we usually contact another newspaper, and they print it for us if they can. But, we still have to work around their deadlines and their newspaper. But we have a really good working relationship with some other newspapers, and that allows us to do it. I mean, there was one time we lost power on the east side of Mitchell Street where we are, and on the west side of Mitchell Street, right across the street from us, they had power, and it was late at night, and we were close to deadline, and the power went out for us. The owner had a friend who had a building right across the street, or pretty much across the street, and they had power. So in the middle of the night, we were literally moving computer equipment across the street so we could put the paper together to send it to another newspaper so they could actually print it. So those nights are hectic. They're kind of fun when you're done, but at the moment they're really hectic.
Yeah, I bet. Yeah. Do you have anything else to say about the news business?
Geez, I have a lot I could say about the newspaper business, but I'd probably bore you. Is there anything specific that you can think of? Or, well, let me ask you this. Since we've been doing this, we started this in September. What have you learned about the newspaper?
I've learned that a lot more of the stories are a lot more positive than I originally thought, because usually when you see like the news on TV and stuff like that, it's very negative and like, oh, this is going on. These are bad people, all those kinds of things. But then like actually doing these like quick news updates kind of comes to show how like positive our newspaper is.
Yeah. It's funny. We talk about that. We have groups coming into the newspaper every year, and we talk about perception of news. And generally, people remember the bad things that happen, unfortunately. And, it's the good stuff that sometimes it maybe doesn't stand out as much because some of the bad news is really unexpected. And that's part of it. We did have, years ago, we had someone that thought the same thing. Said, well, the paper's really negative, and it's really negative to this company that I work for. And so we invited them in and said, well, here, take a look. You can go back as far as many newspapers as you want, because we have all the newspapers that pretty much that we've ever printed. And use your own criteria, what you think is good news and bad news, and let us know what you think. And after they did that, it was overwhelmingly positive news that was in the newspaper. And then, like I said, there's a lot of really good stories out there, and there's a lot of positive stories out there. There's also negative news, if you would, or bad things that happen, and unfortunately, we have to cover those. I know people think, wow, you guys must love covering when something bad happens, and no, that's not true, because it affects the reporter, when you're working on a story because, it's depressing. It's sad, and nobody really likes talking about it. But a lot of times it's really important to the community to know what happened and what's going on.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, besides that, is there anything else that kind of surprised you about the newspaper?
Like I did find while listening to some of these stories that some of the stories were actually a lot more interesting than I originally thought. Like now that like I have like a brief summary of what it is, I'm like, oh, okay, that's actually interesting. I want to know more. So it's just like originally I would just like read the headline and it's like, that's not a story I'd want to listen to. But maybe just like reading a little bit more into it, maybe we'll find like an interest in things we might not find an interest in.
Yeah, well, yeah, that's great. It's hard to, headline writing's hard. And it's hard to, really encapsulate everything in 5, 6, 7 words. So, yeah, I'm glad that we noticed that they're a little more interesting. We're always trying to make them interesting, but not sensational.
Thanks for joining us for Quick News Questions with the Cadillac News. And I hope you learned something. And if you want to check out more stories from the Cadillac News, go ahead and check out their website at cadillacnews.com or pick up a newspaper from the newsstand.